So this is kind of perfect. I could have not asked for a better talk to precede my talk, given that I'm going to talk a little bit more about BDD as well, but in a different context. So this is kind of cool. So my name is Itamar. I run the product operations group at a company called O-Power. And a couple of months ago, I was working with a team on a big process change that we were introducing to the organization. And the conversation moved to talk a little bit more about, well, how do we measure the success of this process change? And very soon we realized, or we reached a conclusion, that what matters in this effort is the behavior change that we're driving. Are we successful in driving the behavior change that we're hoping to drive in the process? Now, I am a very big frameworks nerd, and I like to mash up frameworks. So taking concepts from one domain and seeing whether they're applicable to different ones. And this conversation about behavior brought BDD to mind. And the question that I was asking myself was, well, can this concept that helps us think about software development and fixing problems within a software domain can be applicable also when we're talking about people and talking about the behavior of people rather than the behavior of software? So at a very high level, for those of you who are not familiar with BDD, it's a concept developed by Dan North about 10 years ago that's trying to outline an approach to how to think about software testing. The question that I was asking is are these guidelines can be also applicable in process, not just in software? And this is where this kind of like funny terminology or acronym came to be. So Dan started by defining the end goal. What is he hoping to accomplish with this process? He wanted to make sure that there's effective design and clean code. And he defined that by having something with tangible stakeholder value, delivered on time incrementally, easy to deploy and manage, robust in production, and easy to understand and communicate. Now guess what? If I think about effective process, the same definition applies. Tangible stakeholder value, delivered on time, incrementally, easy to deploy and manage, robust in production, easy to understand and communicate. The other thing that Dan did was his reaction, BDD is a reaction to some of the challenges that he was experimenting or experiencing with regards to test-driven development. Answering questions like where to start in the process, what to test and not to test, how much to test in one go, what to call the test, and how to understand why the test fails. Well, the same concepts apply for process as well. We want to know where to start in the process. We want to know where to introduce process and where to not introduce process. How much process to introduce in one go, what to call the process, and how to understand why a process fails. This is how he explained how BDD works. Where to start, it's basically what's the most important thing that the system doesn't do. What to call the test is easy. It's basically the behavior that's describing what you're interested in. How much to test becomes a non-issue because there's only that much that you can describe in terms of a behavior in a given sentence. And when it fails, it can only fail if one of these three things happen. You either introduced a bug, right, change the system in a way that caused the wrong behavior, the behavior moved to somewhere else in the code, or the actual test is no longer necessary. Well, the same applies for process as well. What process to introduce next? Where do we need a little bit more process? Around the area that's most important thing that the system, our human system in this case, doesn't do right now. How to call it? Again, based on the behavior that we're trying to change. How much of it to introduce? Again, change one behavior at a time. So this is the unit of granularity that makes the most sense here. And then how do I know that my process failed? Or why did it fail? Because we introduced a bug. We basically put a process in place that encourages the wrong behavior. The behavior is moved. Somebody else is now responsible for this thing or supposed to behave in a certain way. Or we don't really need this process anymore. We're no longer trying to change this behavior. There's a couple of slides here around like mechanics, user stories, and describing process through user stories. I'm not going to go through these. We're out of time. But I'll have it up on SlideShare and tweet it out so people